Okay, so I'm here for another SaaS founder interview live with Thomas from Kumul.io. Hi, Thomas. Thanks for joining us. Can you give us a bit of an intro about yourself and tell us what you do?
Sure. Hey, Peter. Good morning. Sure. Yeah, my name is Thomas, one of the co-founders and heading sales here at Kumul.io. We're actually a SaaS company ourselves and focusing on SaaS companies by offering a building block for, we call it embedded analytics, right into their own application to offer their end customers a seamless custom analytics experience. So really alleviating developers of developing dashboards by offering a building block like Stripe is doing for payments or Intercom is doing for chat.
Fantastic. So SaaS companies use your analytics tools and dashboards in their product for their end users. How did you get to build this platform, this product? What was the need or the use case that you applied?
Well, that's a great question because we actually started in a slightly different way. So we started about 6 years ago with my two co-founders, Karel and Arun, who are the technical founders who actually had the initial idea to set up a business user-friendly alternative for the techie players out there like Tableau, etc., for internal reporting. So really an application that non-technical people can start dragging and dropping insights on the tools they use like CRMs, accounting platforms, etc. And eventually after, then we were into selling to SMBs just to eventually go up market. But then after a year or two, we saw also the SaaS market taking up. And we from the start already had an API first approach, a cloud first approach. And there was a huge, and also actually SaaS companies coming to us where we had a connector to for internal reporting. Hey, could we have this in our product? And we started thinking maybe there's a better market and a better focus there for us. So eventually turned that around, pivot that around, and started looking towards SaaS companies to work directly with.
Great. Well, excellent pivot. And I think that use case seems to be working really well. We were just talking about how the wave of SaaS has been growing recently. So you're able to pivot and ride that wave and grow in SaaS. Now, you haven't had a great deal of funding. Can you tell us a bit about your funding journey and how you built the business?
Yeah, for sure. We always had pretty pragmatic approach towards funding, might be more the European mindset, not sure. So we took off, let's say mid 2016, and then had 2 funding rounds so far. A very small one or limited one back in 2017 of $500,000, and then another $3.5 million 3 years later, end of 2020, it's kind of mid COVID. Which was an interesting one in those days. And we always had the mindset of, hey, let's raise money if we really know what to do it and invest in channels that we believe in. And that's something we're still doing nowadays. So we're still like using the proceeds of that second round. And just to give you a perspective, in terms of ARR, we're pretty much on par with the funding we raised. So in that perspective, it's something that we really truly believe in, that raise what you really need for and how you see the team grow. While we could potentially have raised way more, but the growth has been there with what we've done so far. So really happy with that.
So you raised about 4 million today. Your ARR is at about 4 million. You have a team of around 45 people now, right? What did you use that funding for? When you raised the 3.5 million, do you consider that a seed round?
Yeah. It's always tough, right? If the market evolves like a pre-series A, something like that. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's an A.
Yeah. So what was your reason for raising that round, and how have you been using that cash?
Yeah, sure. Couple of reasons. First of all, we saw pretty nice traction here in the European markets. We had back in the days first traction in the US, so we really want to kind of push the pedal there. We already had first 2-3 colleagues by then on the US ground, so that's expanding also our footprint in the US, and by now kind of 1/3 of what we have in terms of revenues or ARR is coming from there. And then secondly, it's also towards the product, right? We have a pretty stuffed roadmap, which is actually publicly available, kumul.io/roadmap, where you can interact with it. And where we focused on a number of features, focused also on increasing performance, etc., towards gearing up towards the US as a second big geography and expanding there. This also means like certification programs like SOC 2, Type 2 compliance. Those are things we also already wrapped up by now.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so you opened an office in Brooklyn, and
Yeah,
you have about 10 people there now, huh? 10
yeah,
people on that team. Can you talk to us about the challenges and the process of setting up from a European base over in the States?
yeah, sure. So very early on, we saw the potential within SaaS companies, and a lot of SaaS was obviously also happening in the US. So we started flying in regularly with the founders and the expanded team. And then back, I guess it was in 2019, we said, okay, let's have somebody full time on the grounds. And there we use one of the local programs, like funded programs, to have an enthusiastic, ambitious Belgian professional with a couple of years under the belt, Toon, to be our first full-timer on the ground, where we help them by flying in and being together there. Obviously, it was COVID, so a lot of times also on the calls. And he was able to expand our initial footprints with some nice new customers. Then our marketing manager also joined. Eventually, we started also hiring local native US people, first in the US office, and now we also have 4 people remote. So it's not all in Brooklyn, but also more and more remote, also in Texas to cover some time coverage as well.
Okay. You mentioned there was a funded program. Can you explain what is that
Yeah.
and how that works?
Sure, it's actually a local program that's called the Prince Albert Fund, which is linked to our former King Albert, and in the days he was a prince, obviously, and it's a funded government program, I believe, in a way that, of course, we need to contribute as a company, but they select on a yearly basis 25 ambitious and skilled young professionals that are willing to help Belgian companies set first steps or eventually expand the footprint abroad. Typically, it's a business development mission. And one of those 25 back in 2019 was Stone. And after that year, we eventually decided together to proceed to welcome him on in the team, which is not always the case. So we're very happy with that possibility. And with us, I guess, many other tech and Belgian companies.
Hey, that's a great initiative and helps get some of the talented Belgian businesses out and around the world. So you sent this member of your team over to begin operations over there.
We had first operations already by flying there, having a remote, but he was a first full-timer, let's say, on the ground there. And he expanded that and eventually also started new initiatives that are still running right now.
That's great. So is the best practice for this taking members of your existing team, say from Belgium where you're based, over to the States, getting the things up and running there, and then building around with hiring some local people to build out that team?
Yeah, that's how we did it. And eventually we're happy with the approach. Of course, before going in that route or in that direction, talked with a lot of other founders and SaaS companies, and you have obviously different approaches. You can also potentially with more funding, hire a full-blown team and rely on that experience. I wouldn't go that way. Potentially not in a second time. I would still take it more from a pragmatic note and see if you can go yourself or eventually with somebody who has been here for a while and then moves over. I think that's for us still the recommended way.
Yeah, because I've seen some SaaS companies and I've heard stories of companies that have tried to go from Europe to the States, open an office, and then eventually it hasn't worked out and they've closed the office down and come back to Europe and decided to refocus on Europe. So how do you ensure that you get the best chance to succeed? Because it's quite a big move and the time zone difference, the market difference, you've got all these challenges.
Yeah, that's true. And eventually we had done moving over end of 2019 with only 3 months before really COVID hit. That was a surprise for, I guess, a lot of us.
Wow, right.
So that was also for us raising a lot of question marks. Okay, will this work out? And eventually it did, showing that in the early days, we went also meeting customers or prospects face to face, but eventually it turned out that we kept on bringing in new prospects, which were eventually able to close over video call, which was for us a strong signal that this is actually working in COVID and should also work when COVID starts fading away.
Cool. Okay, great to hear about that process. Now I know you're chief sales officer, right, at Cumulio. So I'm really interested in how you've developed your sales playbook, your process, and how you acquire your customers now.
Sure. I can tell a bit more to that. So very early on, one of our first team members was actually a marketeer, an online marketeer, who's still with us, still doing a great job. Eventually, that's the person who moved to the member who moved to the US. And she's really been driving also content generation, eventually some paid channels. So a lot of the leads that we've been driving over the years has been coming from marketplaces, has been coming from inbound. So that's still like a very strong source to us. Right. In parallel, I'd say that also after the second round, we've been focusing on bringing outbounds to a next level. We had some initial initiatives, initial successes, but never really in a scalable way. There we had some new team members joining who had some expertise setting up a new process, especially also in the US and now also in Europe, where we see a very complementary channel. So we keep those two as being our two most important ones. And then lastly, I've been experimenting last year with partnerships on the products and on the services side. That's still running, but it takes time. I'll be very open about that. We have first partnerships, let's say, in the proof of concept stage, but it takes time. So it's something you should again approach from a pragmatic approach instead of really going full blown in, I would say. But mainly inbound and outbound. Also think about community now with our new VP of marketing, and then partnerships is something that we're step by step growing into.
Building. So you started. Essentially, would you say your first acquisition channel was really inbound through marketplaces, essentially?
Yes.
So how does that work? Are you listing Cumulio on marketplaces of other tech companies or other large products?
Then I'm referring also to the days where we were building our own connectors and we had internal reporting capabilities, so we're focusing on that. That was logical to be on the HubSpots and the other CRM players out there. Eventually, we stepped down there, but kept on being available on the Capterras, the G2, etc. So really making sure people could find us there. We have also been trialing with some G2 sponsored programs in the days, but right now that's still something we're doing, but also mainly focusing on generating content and using that content to reach out and bring the message out towards potential interested parties.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, I know our audience, mostly the SaaS Founders Facebook group and the channels that we usually share our interviews on are mostly, like I say, SaaS founders or people working in the industry.
Yeah.
So how would you recommend, if they're interested in Cumulio, how would you recommend they check out the product or get to know a little more about how they could make the best of it?
Sure, yeah. There's a lot of material already available on just our landing page, our website, cumulio.io. We do have a free trial program with all features enabled if you want to sniffle around. And then, feel free to engage on the chat or reach out to myself, Thomas at Cumulio, or hello at cumulio.io if you like to have a human interaction, so to say. But a trial is something that I would highly recommend if you're interested.
And what's a great example of a use case for a SaaS company?
Sure. Yeah, we have a couple of verticals where we see a lot of traction. Could be in the HR space, in the marketing space, but also in the CRM space. One of the players there that I'm thinking out loud is a French player, Celsi. Some of you might know them. It's an SMB kind of Facebook, Salesforce platform. And they use us for a number of use cases. Is it on deals, on invoices, on time tracking, and also, for example, also facilitates the possibility for their users not only to look at the dashboards in the platform embedded, but potentially also adapt them to their liking inside their product.
Super. Okay, so they get some really good data visualization and representation on that.
100%.
Awesome. Hey, Thomas, thank you so much for joining me. Really enjoyed our chat. And keep in touch. We'll see you at the next SaaS conference, I'm sure.
With pleasure. Thanks for having me, Peter.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.